Thank you, Katrina, and thank you guys. You guys are great, great, great. And I thought she was going to sing about a half an hour when you pulled that music sheet out. I wasn't sure. Okay, yeah. Well, what can I say, parts? Anyway, oh, well, we're going to do something a little different this morning, and some people are really happy about it because I'm not going to speak. I'm going to interview. Okay. See, there we go. Ah, the truth will set me free. But anyway, today we're going to talk about for a while and discuss for a while the creative process. And what I hope that you glean from this is that you too are creative. And you can say, as you listen to this and listen to Dawn and Joe, who will be our guests this morning, uh, how that process can work in you as they demonstrate how it works in them. And so we do have two people. One has been a member of the church for, I don't know, going on 20 years or more. She is a creative soul. She always has an idea, and then she has an idea to follow that idea. And the wonderful thing is she knows how to put those ideas into action. Her name is Dawn Flores. So, Dawn, would you please join us this morning? Thank you, dear. And then her fiance, Joe Johnson. Joe is very creative. He brought Dawn into imagination, and she showed up, okay? Anyway, but Joe is a writer, he's a poet, he is a producer, and as he says, his paying job is working for the state. So, Joe, come on up here and join us, please. Just have a seat, guys. And as we start this process, just a thought is that the creative process really begins with two or more thoughts tied together as an idea. And when you start to look at that, there's a lot more steps to it, but that's where it starts. Nothing comes into being without it first being a thought. And so my first question to these guys is there a method that you use for tying thoughts together into ideas that become manifested into our outer world?
Wow.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
um, is there a method and an approach that you would use in order to bring or synthesize these different ideas? And I think, for me anyhow, I do kind of have a method. It's walking my dog. That's what I do actually. And
So, folks, you heard it right here. That's his
So,
creative process.
The secret to the creative process is walking your dog. Well, not necessarily just that, but here's the rationale behind that. What that does is it allows me to get into a space where I don't have a lot of conflicting things going on, business, state, whatever. And I live over at Stratford Hills by Pony Pasture, so I walk around the wetlands there, which is really beautiful and nice and quiet. And I take a little notebook with me, and I'll scribble out. I kind of listen for what it is I'm supposed to be writing about, and I take my notebook and I scribble it out. And I think one of the things that happens is I'm letting my conscious mind kind of go away, or my ego kind of drop away, and letting my subconscious come out. And I was thinking about this interview, and I remembered an anecdote about Einstein. Einstein, of course, came up with the theory of relativity, which we all know and love. And he was struggling with it. Believe it or not, Einstein struggled. In fact, I think one of the things we'll talk about is how most creative people actually struggle a lot. But he was struggling with coming to terms with time and mass and gravity and how this all fits together, and he really didn't get it, right? And he had a dream. So his conscious mind stops working on it. His subconscious mind comes out, and he has this dream. And what he dreams is of a person riding a photon, a light particle. And then it suddenly clicks, and he's like, it's all relative. He's on the light. He's in that moment, in that structure itself, and you have to go at the speed of light in order to understand what the speed of light is. Anyhow, to make a long story short without getting into physics, he had to let his conscious mind go. He had to let his subconscious mind come up with a solution for him. I think that's really what part of the creative task is about.
Thank you. And Dawn?
And what you described is really getting out of your own way.
Yes.
And so that's what I do too. And for me, there's certain things that really activate my creative energy. And the most important one is getting my hands in the dirt and being outside. The months of April and May, I just want to be outside in the garden and I don't want to do anything else. It really fortifies and nurtures me in a very deep way. Um, the other thing I do a lot of is always when I'm consciously creating, that's passive creating, just emptying myself. But when I'm consciously creating, I always try to get in a state of feeling versus thinking or being in an emotional state. And I see with my students a lot when they're struggling and having a really difficult time, I always ask them, what are you thinking? And they always have a thought that's way in the future and it's not in the present moment. And so I say, what are you thinking? I'm thinking I'm wasting my money. I'm thinking my husband's going to think I'm wasting my time. He's not going to like this. It's all about outcome. It's all about attachment to the future. And that's when you're having emotional reactions. But when you're feeling, when you're feeling what it's like to have the brush on the paper, when you're looking at how beautiful the colors are, everything else falls away. You get out of your own way, and the creative process just kind of takes over, and the process itself guides you through it. And you arrive at something that you can't plan or conceive of ahead of time.
You talked about your students, and you talked about one of them who irritated you.
Yeah.
Mm. How did you deal with that? Okay, share that story, would you? Because it's part of it really is breaking through into the creative
Yeah,
process.
and I think you asked me, in the first service, what I try, how do I guide my students in general? And I think primarily it's as a teacher, teaching the creative process, it's my job to love my students first and foremost, and to not take responsibility for their learning or their outcome, and to recognize that they're masters and they're going to figure it out on their own. If I get to figure out how to play a role in that, then that's a gift to me. But this one student in particular, he was very tall and he was getting in my space and he was doing all the things a teacher doesn't want a student to do, talk when they're not supposed to be talking, taking his phone out, asking me challenging questions that had nothing to do about the lesson. So he was triggering me, and I had to really think about what it was that was making me have a hard time with him. And I realized that I felt like I was being managed and that he was trying to manage me. And so instead of being angry at him for that, I realized that that was his insecurity and that was his coping with a difficult situation. And I had compassion for him. And then when I had that insight, I got in his space when he was working and I was just quiet and I waited. And my experience is that a student will tell you exactly what they need. And so I waited, and he mentioned retirement. And I said, what did you do before you retired? And he said, oh, I was a CEO of a major medical corporation. And I said, oh, so you're used to managing everything around you, and now all you have to manage is this painting. And he didn't move, but I felt this shift. And he looked at me out of the corner of his eye like, oh, she's got my number now. But that was an opening between the two of us, and it made him vulnerable, and it made him be able to trust me. So then after that, he could hear what I had to say, and I was able to tell him after that. I was able to tell him things that were difficult for him to hear, but they helped him become a better painter.
Thank you. So being vulnerable to the inner self becomes important so that you can release the ego.
Yeah.
And so that you can then have a better view of how to really be creative, to follow the healing process. I love the way you said that. So, Joe, what's the method? We get the idea and we then let it, work around a little bit. You write some notes down. But how do you take those ideas and put them eventually into action? How do you take that invisible idea and make it visible to yourself and others?
Oh, well, you have to write it out if you're a writer, or you have to paint it out if you're a painter, or sculpt it if you're a sculptor, and so forth. So whatever medium that you happen to be working in, and just as an aside, creative activity I think occurs in all walks of life. So just about every decision you make, ultimately it can be a creative decision. It depends on you how you handle that, but I think everybody can be creative. So writers and artists and so forth sort of get the honorific of creative person, but everybody is essentially. But I think the thing maybe that makes it manifest, that will make a work of art or writing or whatever come to life, is your willingness to really work at it and to not back off. So a lot of times you begin with this germination, this idea. Maybe it's an anecdote that you've heard, or a joke, or maybe you've got an emotional thing that you're working through in your life, some kind of processing of your life, and you want to express this some way. And so you take a crack at it, and maybe it's okay, maybe it's not okay, maybe it's not quite what you want. And what really separates somebody that's going to make that happen and somebody that's not going to make that happen is your willingness to make mistakes, your willingness to try again and try again and try again and just keep working at it until it gets to that point where you want it to be. And so it assumes a couple of things. It assumes that you know where you're going, or have some general idea of where you're going to go. And then it assumes that you're willing to make mistakes and to realize and to become a student, right? To go back to sort of the foundling, like, oh, no, that's wrong. This is not what I want. You have to understand that. And then finally, you have to have, I think, just the desire, the will, the passion, whatever you want to call it, to push that through. Because it doesn't happen unless you want it to happen. All of that has to be kind of in place. Does that work?
That works for me.
Okay.
Dawn, does that work
And
for
you
you?
have to have curiosity
Sure.
and exploration. There has to be a little bit of mystery in it,
There
a
has
little
to
bit
be
of unknown,
a little risk taking, I think, is
Mhm.
absolutely correct.
But persistence.
Sure.
Now, you said earlier that you used to try to control the
Everything.
creative process
Everything.
and everything.
No,
And-
I know.
Have the wedding invitations been sent out yet? Did you send out the wedding invitations yesterday
Yeah,
or not?
we did.
Oh,
Yeah,
you did.
I
So you can
did.
say that.
I can
okay.
say that. It's
Okay, good. Yeah.
He thinks
That was a joke
he
yesterday.
thinks
We
he's
were
safe
talking about
now.
this, and the wedding invitations were in the car. Okay. Anyway, so tell me a little bit about that.
Wait.
How you've worked through
Where was the question?
not
More
not
detail,
Joe.
please.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I got it.
Yeah, right.
Well, before, I've been an artist a long time, 48 years, and at a certain point, I would, get an idea, and then I would try to figure everything out in order to do it, and that kind of worked, but my projects stayed really small, and they were limited to what I could pre-plan. And then I think through, coming to Unity and a lot of self-development and things like that, I had a lot of profoundly spiritual experiences and really learned about trust and mystery. And then working collaboratively, like on the facilities committee here, and working with Beyond Barbie, and taking leadership things, I learned different ways to go about doing my projects. And so now I hold the ultimate vision, and I allow that to be malleable. And I just make sure I know the next step and the next step and the next step. And that's all I need to worry about. And I have faith that the path is going to present itself as I take one step forward. And when I do that, creative people are drawn to me.
Mhm.
They bring their ideas, and it builds and percolates and changes and unfolds into things that, wow, we're going to do this. This is amazing. So the work begins to amaze me when I do it like that.
Yeah, thank you. What it reminds me of is that there was a woman um, who was really afraid of the woods, and so she went camping in Yosemite, where a lot of redwood forest. Okay, and
Mm.
she would want to go out in the morning or in the evening. She really wanted to go out in the evening and be with it, but she was afraid to because it was so dark. And she was trying to figure out if she could follow the path. And she was always figuring out, how do I get to the end of the path, which she knew where it was in the daytime, but she didn't. She wasn't sure she could follow at night. So what she did is one evening she finally got the courage up and she took a flashlight and she started walking the path. And what she learned was all she needed was enough light to see the next step.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the creative process that you were talking about, I believe.
Very good.
So, how do you see your connection with spirit? How do you see spirit guiding you, directing you? Or is this a spiritual experience? Do you think it is? And you don't have to think that, but do you think it is as you talk about the creative process?
Um, yeah, in some ways it is, sure. I think, especially if, for me, I do fiction writing, so, and this is going to maybe sound a little prideful. I hadn't thought of it this way quite yet, but in order to get characters to live, to actually breathe, and to be separate from who you think they should be, you got to just drop your ego and let them speak through you. So in a way, I think that process maybe is analogous to almost like a mystical experience where you're just saying, this is going to happen, and I'm just going to let this happen, and these characters do their thing.
Let the power of your imagination.
Right, and you just let that go without, you have to come back to it every once in a while and say, well, wait a minute, that's not alive, that's not authentic. And there's this kind of weird, I'm going to swear, but I'll try to make it very gentle, that Hemingway called a shock-proof BS detector. I'll do that.
We can record that. You don't have to.
Yeah,
okay,
that's
yes,
okay.
that's good.
You have to have a shock-proof BS detector. So when you're reading your work, right, and you're looking at it, it's like, no, that's not right. This isn't real for the character. This is not appropriate. It just doesn't make sense. It might sound good for you, right, and who you are or who your personality is, but it's not right for that character. So you've got to be able to discern that, and then you've got to have the gumption to rip it out and rework it until you get it right. And then you've got a living character, and so you touch divinity to that extent, I think, yes.
Thank you. Dawn, how about you?
Well, for me, in my writing, I'm writing prayers. I wrote a musical, which is a passion play, and it deals with a lot of spiritual principles. So for me, I'm intellectually, emotionally, spiritually sorting things out through my writing. And then through my the other creative things I do, dance or paint or photography, I feel like what I learned as a writer, I translated into those other mediums and became more effective at them by my understanding of the creative process. That I feel like we are all creators. We are created in God's image, and that's what we're talking about, our creativity. And that it is our greatest gift, it's our greatest untapped resource, and it's our tool for self-healing. And so I have tremendous faith in the creative process. And by devoting myself to it and following it, I arrive at my own self-healing again and again and again. And I've seen it over and over again in my students too. And it's a really wonderful, beautiful thing. And it's really important as a culture, I feel, that we understand that so that we get resources and opportunities to our children in our schools, in our churches, in our communities, so that children have outlets to this. Because I feel like in our country, we commodify the arts and we assign them to professionals, and Matthew Fox talks about this denial of our creativity. And the denial of our creativity is the denial of our humanity. And when we deny it in ourselves, we project jealousy upon artists who are not denying it within themselves. So it is not a commodity. The true value of art is in self-healing. And our personal wounds, our communal wounds, our world wounds, that's how we heal them.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a quilt over here behind me,
The quilt.
and it has a pattern in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there was a way in which you developed a process that was kind of interesting, I thought, to develop the pattern.
Okay.
Can you share that story with
About
us?
me being a student.
Amen.
Yeah. So I'm working on the forest project, which is documenting 60 acres of urban forest about to be clear cut for development any day now. And I uh, started January last year, and they told me the woods would be cut in 3 months. So I was in a really big hurry, and I thought the fastest way to document it would be go into the woods and pick up leaves and then just print them. But I didn't know how to do that. So I took a class in printmaking. And I got into the class, and I remembered why I wasn't a printmaker and why I didn't do it for 30 years. I didn't like the process, but I was stuck because I took the class where I work. My boss was my teacher. All the other students who had been doing it for like 20 years and were really, really good knew I was a teacher. So it wasn't like Dawn couldn't show up for class one day. So I had, I was in the back corner with the other new girl, and and we were like, helping each other, but I was struggling, and you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at me that I was struggling. And the struggle didn't last a really long time, because thank God I had all this teaching experience, and I was able to be schizophrenic and be a teacher to myself. And I told myself, okay, find something about this process that you love. Find one thing. And so I thought about it, and all I had was that I liked squeezing the ink out and rolling. I'm like, I like this. Okay. So I built on that, and I built on that. And, that was just a couple of weeks, but I got over myself because that was just my ego. So whenever you start something that's going to be big, your ego makes a big fit. So I think that's a really important thing to do in the creative process, to recognize, oh, I'm uncomfortable, and just recognize it. It's going to go away, but don't give up when you're uncomfortable. So I didn't give up, and I decided, okay, what else is wrong? I've been in my studio alone for 30 years, and I'm in a studio with a whole bunch of people, and they're all talking. So I came into the studio by myself one day and spent the day, and I got really comfortable. And by the end of the day, I was like Edward Scissorhands. I was using both of my hands, and I pulled a print. The stuff that ended up on the paper wasn't so great, but the actual plexiglass plate that I was using, I was fascinated with. I really loved it, and I wish that had been on paper. It ended up that I dried it and framed it, and that was the centerpiece for the printmaking exhibition later that year. So I went from, oh my God, what am I doing, to producing something of value. The other thing that happened in that class was I was going out to the woods to collect leaves, and all the trees were bare. So I started taking pictures. And then I would take those pictures and put them on my computer. And I was actually cheating at printmaking by figuring out the colors and splicing them. I was trying to plan my prints before I went into class. And so then I became fascinated with that. And I started splicing them together. And I spliced one picture together of a sycamore tree, and there appeared a spider, an owl, a calf, and a deer. And I was like, what's going on here? Well, this is the mathematical intelligence of the universe revealing itself to me. And I went, oh, what's going to happen if I do this? What's going to happen if I do this? So I went into that childlike exploration mode, and I couldn't turn it off. So I was showing up to class every week. I don't have a print, but I have 200 patterns. And all my fellow students were really encouraging me, and they were like, yes, these are great. Do more, do more. And so I started splicing those Rorschachs or mandalas together, and then they became fabric patterns. So those fabric patterns turned into this idea of making quilts. And Maureen Anderson made a quilt out of that very pattern I was talking about. Deer, calf, owl, spider is the white pattern on here. And then the blue pattern is called liquid trees. It's the sunset on some trees. And then the periwinkle one is wild cherries and buttercups. So these are all photographs from the woods that I've spliced together, made into fabric patterns, and I have 20 quilt makers making quilts for me, and I want to do an installation in the forest adjacent to the woods that's being clear cut.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
What-
Yeah, Joe.
One thing I just want to point out about that, which I think is brilliant, is that when Dawn was in that printmaking shop, she didn't intend for this quilt to be the outcome of that.
Who could
Right.
think of that?
Right.
Right.
Thank
So
you.
she made it in a very peripatetic fashion. It was all sort of mistake. Oh, I'll handle this. It was all ad hoc. It was all very agile. And that's the way the creative process works.
You just let it work.
You let it work.
And you
And what happens? Explore, explore, explore.
Right.
Yes.
Take risks, explore.
you pay attention to what your thoughts are and and the direction you're going.
Yeah.
Just one quick little thing I'd like for you to answer quickly is I'm teasing you, but anyway, you said you dried that
The
one
plexiglass
print, right?
plate,
How
yeah.
did you dry that? What process did you use?
Oh, well, I stuck it in my car and I didn't wash it.
And it baked, right? Thank you.
It was an accident.
It was an accident.
Part of the
right.
creative process. And then one last question here. I got questions. We could go on and on. But anyway, one of the things I was just wondering, Joe, when you are writing, when you are producing, when you do the work that you do, part of that process is the editing process.
Mhm.
How does that work for you?
Oh, well, hopefully well. I think
It's a loaded question.
Yeah, I know. I think every everybody really has two parts to themselves when they're in the creative act. One part is that producer going to town, making stuff, Edward Scissorhands doing all kinds of great stuff. And then the other part is the discerner, right? And they're looking at what it is they produce, and they're making some harsh judgments sometimes. And the thing that I think maybe is important about those judgments, it's about the product. It's not about the person who produced the product, right? So what you're judging is, okay, this doesn't quite work. This needs to be a little bit shorter answer. I know we're getting there. So what you want to do is, right, you just cut and you let it go. And that becomes part of the ego dropping away. And you let that product become what it needs to become.
Thank you very much.
And you have a really good editor.
And sometimes you have a really good editor.
Yes, I know. It's nice to be in love with your editor.
It is.
Anyway,
Sounds familiar, huh?
helps a lot, doesn't it? Yeah. Anyway, if you kind of listen to this part, and as you heard some words, I want to kind of put them together from a metaphysical standpoint. The first two chapters of Genesis, most of us remember that, are two chapters which are about the creative process. Not God's creative process, although that's there. It is about our creative process. Let me give you some examples. In the beginning, there was the void. And usually when we're in the void, we think we have a problem. But what we really have is an opportunity. And as we sit in the void, we start to see the opportunity because we start to see light. God said, let there be light. And so this light comes on, and the light represents, in essence, an idea. Thoughts and ideas. And then the next thing is that these thoughts and ideas come into formation automatically within ourselves to create imagination. And we can imagine anything we choose to imagine about those thoughts and ideas. That's up to us. And then as imagination starts to take place, which is a picturing in your mind of what these thoughts and ideas would look like if they were produced into the real world, what happens is that we then have to have faith. We have to believe in the process. We have to believe in the universe. We have to believe in ourselves. We have to believe that we are children of God and that we are created with this creative ability, and every one of us is. Then, once we have that, we need understanding. We need understanding intellectually, and we need understanding spiritually. Because it's through the spiritual understanding we can discern what we need to do next with the process. If it needs to be edited, if it needs to be changed, if it needs a new thought, then we have to be willing to open ourselves and let go of the ego at that point and do that. And when we do that, we know that we need the will. Joe mentioned that. I need the willpower to pursue what it is I'm starting to believe in, or I believe in. And I also need the strength to endure it, because you know what happens when you tell your best friend about the great idea that you have? Yeah. Are you crazy? What are you talking about? How can you do that? You know, how much money is that going to cost? How in the world are you going to make that change? On and on it goes. And we have to have the strength and the faith and the ability to endure that. It's natural. It's okay. And if you listen to it without, as Joe explained, without getting your ego caught up in it, you really can find some new ways and new paths to grow and to bring whatever it is you're working on forth. And then the next thing is love. You have to love yourself so you can believe in yourself. You have to also love the idea, that which you have imagined. Because when you're in love with it, two things happen. Number one, I think you understand that this idea can be a service to another person or to maybe the universe. Who knows? And that you buy into that to the point that it's important to bring it forth. It's important to let it come forth. And when we do that, you see the next thing that comes automatically is passion and zeal. Nobody can turn you off on it. You are excited. You are into it. You believe in it because you've gone through this process. Now, I heard all of those words and what they were talking about, and I hope you did too. And I just wanted to sum it up. And then the last thing, and sometimes it works throughout the process. Joe had said to me at one point that incubation, that point to just write something down and then let it go. Okay? That through the whole process, sometimes we just have to stop, get ourselves out of the way, and let what I personally call spirit do the work. And when we do that, what we're really doing is releasing, as you guys said, the ego and letting that go. And in Unity, that's how we teach the creative process. The way we do it in life is the way they do it and the way that you do it. If nothing else, I hope you walk away today saying, I am a creative being. I am creative. And if I don't think I am, see Vicki for a counseling session. Free ed. Anyway. But no, seriously, if you feel like you're not, talk about it, pray about it. Talk to others about it a little bit who are creative. And they'll find the creativity in you, as Dawn did with that fellow student, or that student she had. And so I just want to thank these guys. They've done a lot of things in their lifetime already. Joe is an author of a book. A fiction book is out front. Joe has also produces several radio shows. Is a freelance writer. He's the guy who got us into Style magazine and wrote the article in interviewing Arun Gandhi. A great article. Dawn, I don't have time to even start where she starts, but since I've known her, she is an idea person. The first time that I really met Dawn and talked to her, I'd met her at church, and Vicki and I were moving to the house, and I was in the paint department at Lowe's. And there was Dawn. And she says, hi. And I had to think for a second, who is this? And she introduced herself again. And she was there to buy paint to be an artist. I was there to buy paint to paint my house, okay? But both are a creative act, if you look at it that way. And so I'll always remember the first time I met her. It's really easy because that was what happened. And she was dressed like an artist. She had paint all over. I mean, it was embarrassing. No, anyway. She looked great, always, as you do.
That was before I wore a machete around.
That's right.
Yeah. Now she's upgraded to a machete.
So let's just thank them for their time and their energy. Would you thank them very much? Come on, guys. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you. Blessings. Wow. And since they did such a great job on this, we're going to, at least once a quarter, if not more often, do the same thing with many people in our congregation. Sit and interview some aspect of who you are and what you are and how you do it, so it can bring it home. It can be practical. We are practical Christians.